when my own daughter told me I was no longer needed and should go find somewhere else to spend my last days. I packed my bags quietly, just as I had done for decades as the dutiful mother and wife. 3 days later, I found myself sitting across from an attorney, uncovering the shocking truth that the man I'd loved for over 40 years had been playing a long and careful game of strategy. Victoria, my only child, was about to discover that sometimes the pawn you underestimate ends up becoming the queen. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from, because the story I'm about to tell you is full of betrayals, reversals, and more twists than a factory making pretzels. Just 2 months ago, I was Margaret Sullivan, a devoted wife of 43 years, mother to one spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When my husband Robert collapsed from a heart attack at 71, I truly believed my life was over. But Victoria swept in during my grief like a vulture dressed in designer clothes, cooing sympathy in a voice dripping with insincerity. "Mom, you can't handle this big house alone," she said sweetly. "The stairs, the upkeep, all those memories, it's not healthy for you." I should have seen through her concern. She had always been Robert's little princess, the one who could do no wrong. He doted on her banker husband Kevin, and on their children. Meanwhile, I was simply the one who cooked, cleaned, and kept everything running. After the funeral, the pressure began. Victoria and Kevin started bringing real estate brochures to dinner, surrounding me with pamphlets about retirement communities. "Mom, these places are wonderful," she'd say. "People your age, activities, no responsibilities." What she really meant was, no inconvenient mother standing between her and my home. The final blow came 6 weeks after Robert's death. I was still living in what Victoria now called our house, unable to pack up my bedroom. Victoria arrived with Kevin and 2 large suitcases. "Mom," she announced, "Kevin's been promoted. We're moving into town immediately. This house is perfect for us." I blinked at her, not quite understanding. "Move in? But this is my home." Her mask slipped. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it. I've been letting you stay here out of kindness. But it's time for you to find your own place." Her words hit like a physical blow. "Victoria, surely there's been some mistake." "No mistake," she said coolly. "Dad knew I'd take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You were just the wife." 43 years reduced to 3 words. And then she delivered the line that would echo in my mind for days. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." So I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. Kevin loaded them into their BMW with the efficiency of someone taking out the trash. "Margaret, you'll love having your independence again," he said, not meeting my eyes. As we drove away, I watched my house, Robert's house, disappear in the rearview mirror. 4 decades of birthdays, holidays, and care erased in a single ride. The Sunset Inn was the kind of place you'd expect for $49 a night, paper-thin walls, towels no bigger than napkins, and a carpet older than me. Victoria pressed $200 into my hand like she was tipping a waitress. "This should cover you for a few days," she said casually. "Kevin will transfer some money once we settle Dad's papers." Some money from my own husband's estate. After they drove off, I sat on the sagging mattress staring at my suitcases. In less than a morning, I had gone from grieving widow to unwanted burden. The daughter I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for had tossed me aside like broken furniture. But as I sat in that depressing motel room, something began to gnaw at me. Robert had been meticulous, almost obsessive about his documents. Years earlier, he had shown me his will, carefully explained every detail, making sure I understood his intentions. And I was certain what Victoria told me didn't match what Robert had written. Robert had been traditional, yes, sometimes stubborn, but never cruel. The man who held my hand when my mother passed, who never forgot our anniversaries, would never leave me destitute. The next morning, with the last of my cash, I caught a bus to downtown. Robert's longtime lawyer, Harrison Fitzgerald, had handled all our major affairs. When his secretary announced me, Harrison looked up from his desk with genuine surprise. "Margaret, I've been trying to reach you. Your daughter told me you were traveling." "Traveling?" My voice cracked. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I need to know about Robert's will." He frowned. "Didn't Victoria give you a copy?" I handed her the original and several duplicates after the reading. My blood ran cold. "The reading? What reading?" He froze, realization dawning. Margaret, you were supposed to be present. Victoria insisted you were too distraught. She said she'd handle everything and make sure you received your inheritance. My hands shook. She told me I inherited nothing, that everything was hers. Alarm flared across Harrison's face. He opened a thick folder with urgency and pulled out a document. At the bottom was Robert's unmistakable signature. Your husband's will is very clear, he said, voice sharp now. He began to read. I, Robert James Sullivan, leave to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, all its furnishings and 70% of all financial assets, accounts and investments, totaling approximately $23 million. I gasped. $23 million. And the house. And to my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, Harrison continued, I leave $10 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death, contingent upon her treatment of me. Robert had foreseen this. He had known what Victoria might try. Harrison, my voice broke. Victoria told me I had nothing. She gave me $200 and told me to find a senior home. The lawyer's eyes hardened. Margaret, what your daughter has done is fraud and elder abuse. Those documents she waved at you, likely forgeries or outdated drafts. Your husband updated this will only 6 months before his death. I sat stunned as his words sank in. Victoria's disdain at family dinners, her eye rolls whenever I spoke. Her constant dismissal of me, Robert had noticed. He had planned for this. And then Harrison looked up, eyes glinting. There's more. The trust states that if Victoria fails to treat you with dignity after Robert's passing, her inheritance reverts entirely to you. Meaning, I whispered, meaning it's all mine? He nodded firmly. You are not inheriting $23 million, Margaret. You are inheriting $33 million, plus the house, plus everything else. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt something shift inside me. Victoria's greed had triggered the very trap her father left behind. She thought she had won. She was about to learn she had lost everything. Harrison's office became the headquarters for what he wryly named Operation Justice. Within an hour, he had contacted the banks, the police, and even a private investigator. Detective Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman with years of fraud cases behind her, examined the forged documents Victoria had presented me. These are not amateur, she said grimly. Whoever created these had knowledge of legal formatting and access to professional printing. This wasn't improvised, it was planned. I swallowed. Do you think Victoria acted alone? Unlikely. We'll be looking into Kevin's involvement. A crime like this usually requires more than one set of hands. By the afternoon, every account had been frozen. Victoria's credit cards, tied to what she thought were her inheritance accounts, were declined. The utilities she had already switched into her name were suspended. Pending ownership verification, the empire she believed was hers was crumbling in real time. At precisely 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. Mom, where are you? The bank says everything is frozen. Some kind of mistake with Dad's accounts. I steadied my voice. Hello, Victoria. I'm sitting in Mr. Fitzgerald's office. You remember him, don't you? Your father's lawyer? The one who read the real will while you told him I was traveling. There was silence on the line. I continued, my voice calm but edged with steel. I know the truth, Victoria. Your father left me the house, the majority of the assets, and he made your inheritance conditional. Because of your treatment of me, the $10 million he reserved for you is now mine as well. Her voice sharpened, desperate. Mom, you're confused. Grief has clouded your judgment. Someone's manipulating you. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Even caught red-handed, she still tried to twist reality. Listen carefully, Victoria, I said. You forged documents. You committed fraud. You threw your 67-year-old mother out of her home and left her in a motel with $200. And now you're going to face the consequences. Her voice broke into panic. You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter. I felt something hard and final settle inside me. Watch me. I ended the call and looked at Harrison. He smiled warmly, as though he could see Robert's strength in me. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. We have enough evidence for warrants. She'll be arrested this evening, and Kevin's records are already under subpoena if he was involved in those forgeries. He'll face charges too. I thought about Victoria in my house, likely picking out paint samples and shopping for furniture with money. That wasn't hers. Kevin probably crunching numbers, picturing how the fortune would grow under his control. They had no idea that their little empire was about to collapse in spectacular fashion. That evening felt strangely cinematic. Detective Rodriguez insisted I wait in Harrison's office while her team executed the warrants. But she allowed me updates, and each one peeled away the last illusions I had about Victoria. At 6:12 p.m., Rodriguez's phone buzzed. She put it on speaker. "Suspect is in custody," came the voice from the other end. Both Victoria and Kevin apprehended without incident. I closed my eyes. Relief wasn't the right word. It was heavier than that. Something like the loosening of chains I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Rodriguez turned to me. "They'll be booked tonight. Forgery, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit financial theft, and elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" I repeated softly. She nodded. "Kicking you out, manipulating you financially, it falls under that category. A judge will see the gravity of it." For a moment, I saw Victoria as she had been at 6 years old, clinging to my hand on her first day of school, too shy to speak. Where had that child gone? Harrison, as though reading my thoughts, said gently, "Sometimes greed replaces love, Margaret. It's not your fault she chose that path." By the next morning, the story had already leaked. Headlines read, "Local heiress, arrested for forgery and fraud against her own mother." Neighbors who once pitied me now sent flowers and messages of support. When I walked up the front path of my house 2 days later, accompanied by Harrison and Rodriguez, my knees trembled. The oak door swung open with a familiar creak. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender polish, the scent Robert always preferred. "This is your home," Rodriguez reminded me. I stepped into the living room. On the mantel, my wedding photo still stood, though it had been shoved to the side. Victoria must have planned to replace it with one of herself and Kevin. I reached out and straightened it. Tears blurred my vision. I thought I'd never see this place again. "You not only see it," Harrison said firmly, "you own it outright. Victoria and Kevin can't touch a dime of it." I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, doors, and windows like old friends. My heart ached with gratitude for Robert's foresight, for Harrison's loyalty, for Rodriguez's determination. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I felt whole. But the story wasn't over, because justice was one thing, healing was another. As I stood in my bedroom, sunlight streaming across the quilt I had stitched years ago, I whispered to myself, "This is where I begin again." The trial that followed was long but decisive. The forged documents, the fake notary stamps, the bank attempts, it all built a case so solid that even the most expensive lawyers Kevin tried to hire couldn't undo it. Victoria sat in court, her once polished demeanor unraveling. I watched as she avoided my eyes, her hands trembling in her lap. Kevin tried to maintain composure, but when the guilty verdict was read, his face crumbled. They were sentenced. Fines, restitution, and time behind bars. Not forever, but long enough for them to taste the consequences of betrayal. Walking out of that courthouse, I didn't feel triumph. I felt free. Free from the weight of their manipulation, free from the motel room's despair, free from the lie that I was powerless. Life returned in small ways. My neighbors invited me for tea again. Old friends, once kept at a distance by Victoria's control, reached out. I planted roses in the garden Robert and I once tended together. Each bloom reminded me that growth is always possible, even after the harshest winter. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, I reflected on the whirlwind that had almost cost me everything. I thought about love twisted into greed, about the daughter I had lost long before the police ever came, and I thought about the woman I had rediscovered myself, stronger, wiser, unbroken. If I could leave a message to anyone listening, it would be this. Never underestimate your own worth. Never believe the lies of those who try to strip you of your dignity. And never forget, justice, though sometimes slow, has a way of finding its mark. The camera of life doesn't freeze on the moments of betrayal. It lingers on resilience. As the stars rose over my home, I whispered into the evening air, "Robert, I kept the promise. I'm still standing." And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace.